Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Zig Serafin, who is the CEO of Qualtrics. Zig, nice to see you.
Diane, nice to be here.
I feel like we should start with what is Qualtrics. I know it's very well known, enterprise tech world might not be as well known by some consumers.
Well, we're an experience management company, and in its most basic form, we help companies understand their customers, to know what customers are thinking, what they're feeling, and then
So if I sound irritable, when I'm talking to the airline, that's Qualtrics.
Whether you're frustrated, whether it's something that maybe didn't go exactly right that you wish was fixed, or maybe it's remembering what Diane likes when she's traveling or when you're interacting with your favorite brand, and that brand surprising you from time to time. And so our system learns and pays attention to the behaviors of people and what their expectations are, what their preferences are, how you feel about them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we help companies act on it.
What fascinates me, there's so much, but when I read that you were investing $500 million in AI, and you're already obviously an AI powered company, where does that money go, and why? Is that a lot, relatively speaking? Give me some context, since everybody's talking about AI right now. What you've just described clearly, the machine is critical to success. So what do you do from here?
Well, as a company, one of the things that we've been able to do over the last 20 years is get to a point where we have the world's largest human database around sentiment. And when it comes to AI, AI is only as good as the data that it's learning from.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a very unique spot because across many different industries or within industries, we're able to understand how consumer preferences are being shaped, how behaviors are evolving, and what actually drives purchase cycle, what drives the desire for someone to switch from one brand to another. And so AI, in our world, in the investment that we're putting into it, actually becomes an exponential shift in how our technology can be applied to everyday use cases. So we have a very significant investment in AI with the figure that you pointed out, but that's as part of an overall $300 million annual R&D budget that we put in as a company,
right,
to advancing the experience for human beings. And what companies can do with that ultimately changes the way that they navigate the revenue of their company, the way they earn the relationship with their customers, how they coach their employees to interact with their customer, how they create digital experiences that can make or break the difference in whether a brand's going to be a leader in their market or potentially be a follower in their marketplace.
So give me a sense of, because what you're talking about really is deep learning. This is not a conversation about AI, but I'm very curious because so many companies come in now and they talk about being AI first, as if it's easy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this takes years to develop not only the database, but the learning. Where do you go from here? What are you hoping? If I'm working with Qualtrics, say 3 to 5 years from now, what could be possible that might not necessarily be possible today? Is it just, iterative because you've got this database, you can do more with it?
Well, what happens is our system helps companies to develop a personal connection with their customers, to build a more richer relationship that a company can have with every single human being that they end up interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look out into the future, especially with the rise for connecting to a company digitally, you can imagine a digital companion, an experience that today we refer to as the app, right? That you have. Most brands that you interact with, that you and I interact with, there's an app of some kind, right? And today it might be basic on maybe what you bought last week, maybe what you might be thinking about buying the next week. But if you look into the future, that app will become much more of an accommodator, more of an assistant. And our platform is actually enabling companies to be able to go build that personal relationship. So any service or product starts to become more proactive and become more personal to you, given what that brand has learned about your expectations and how you've interacted with them. And so, the world should become more convenient, more personal, more specific to what you want.
You are a global company. And one thing I'm curious about, is it as easy to develop that relationship in all parts of the world, whether it's, the regulatory environment or, the concerns people have about privacy. I mean, this is very anonymized data, but at the same time, you're talking about, hyper-personalization. I'm just curious if you noticed a difference between Europe and the US?
It's a great question. I think anywhere we operate in the world, how a person volunteers their data to be used.
I always press accept.
Yeah, it needs to be.
Shame on me.
Well, but that's part of it, which is that if you choose that, then you have certain expectations, right? You're giving information about yourself that you expect to be used in trust. And usually, most people expect that data will be used in a way to be able to create a more personal connection of some way or another. But trust, transparency, and policies and some of the governance protocols that are behind the scenes are necessary, part of the equation. And one of the unique things that we do is we actually help companies to create that closer relationship with a customer, but where the customer volunteers and says, here's what I want you to know about my expectations, and here's what I want you to do with that. And then applying that capability at scale. So the next time you end up interacting with that brand, you're picking up with where you left off. They've learned about what you are. So you have this memory. And of course, that's all information that's being held in trust with an expectation that you as a customer will receive even better service from that particular brand.
Before I move on, is there any way in which AI is a risk to a company like yours where people might presume that it can suddenly lower their cost base and they can get something that's not as good, but maybe okay? Is that a perception that you have to fight?
You know what? The big trend that we're seeing is companies are coming to us and saying, like, I want to use AI to make my company more human. And of course, to do that really well, it means tools. You're building, you need the tools, you need the ability to say, well, what does it take for me to be able to earn a closer relationship with you? And of course, to do that, that means you start to discover, well, here's your needs, here's your preferences, here's your interests. The last time I interacted with you and I provided you my product or my service, here's where we let you down. We promise to improve the next time because we remember we're going to coach our employees to the following things. Our app will behave in the following way, right? And so this is the way that AI can be used to be able to make an organization more human, and in so doing, actually become a differentiator, for how one brand separates itself from another.
I want to talk about how you came to Qualtrics. I know the company was founded by, I forget if it was a father and two sons, but you spent 17 years at Microsoft. How did it get on your radar screen?
Yeah, it's a great story. The company was founded by Ryan Smith, Jared Smith, and Dr. Scott Smith, who was their father, over 20 years ago, literally in the basement of their house. And the first product that they built was a research tool that went to academic organizations, specifically universities. And
the father was a professor, wasn't he?
The father was a professor, and he wrote books that were used to formulate the curriculum in advanced market research sciences. And that was the beginning of a very interesting company. For about 5 to 7 years, all they did was they built products for university systems in order to be able to advance their capabilities in research and teaching students how to use software tools, especially in market research sciences. One of the brothers was a very well-known and successful employee at Google. And, one of a great mind, great software engineer, great architect. And he took what they had built and redesigned it as almost like a Lego building block system that could be used for a whole wide variety of use cases. Think of it as a Google-like engine for research science.
Yep.
And I had met the company around 2015, and they were at a point where they had many different brands that were using the platform. By this time, students that had gone into the university systems who had learned to use the platform had gone into the workforce, and they'd called and said, hey, we'd love to use this tool. We'd like to use it for such and such application. So when I met the company in 2015, they had a whole wide variety of brands that were using the system. I was introduced through Sequoia Capital. Sequoia was an investor in the company. and was urged to take a look at the company because of just the nature of the platform.
What was the opportunity that you saw? Was this, I know that they were on the cusp of an IPO, then SAP bought it, and now it's private. So we'll go through that.
Well, that happened later.
There you go. That's later.
Yeah.
But so in terms of what was the opportunity you saw going into this?
Well, the opportunity I saw was the ability to change the way that companies were building relationships with customers and employees. But really what inspired me was how similar the problem set was, although it was in a different domain, how similar the problem set was to the kinds of things that I was working on at Microsoft.
Such as what were you working on there?
So I worked on two major areas in the company. One was, along with a couple of other colleagues, we created the system that's called Microsoft Teams today. It started initially as a platform called Link. And our audacious vision that we had in 2002 was that we could change the way that people communicate and how they collaborate in the workplace, especially with the onset of broadband and wireless and the ability to be able to work from anywhere. There was an opportunity to build a completely new type of technology. And it took us 10 plus years to really realize that dream and start to see it actually become something at scale. And then the second thing I worked on was the very early stages of machine learning and statistically based computational science for use cases like language understanding and speech recognition and recommendation systems. And the interesting thing about both of those stories, the latter one is part of what's called Microsoft Azure AI, which is a developer platform. And of course, the latter is Microsoft Teams for communication and collaboration. Both are major platform problems. But the other important thing is that both actually are highly dependent on understanding what human beings are trying to do with the technology. And what I learned was that there was an opportunity to use computers and software to better understand human behavior, to understand what people's intents are. And that was actually a scale problem. Every industry could benefit from that. Every walk of life could benefit from that. But it was a different type of problem. It wasn't just about building a software app at scale. You actually had to have an understanding of biopsychology. So you had to be into the science of understanding how people thought, what people's behaviors are, and how do they actually communicate intent. And so the ability to solve a problem like experience management, which is what we call that today, at scale really required the marriage of great software, great architecture, and a very deep understanding of research sciences.
So, Zig, can you, I'd love to almost drill down a bit, because, experience management's a term that, people could confuse with, customer management. There's also, give me a sense of human sentiment. What did you glean, in terms of, if you came from Microsoft, this database of human sentiment, can you give me an example of what would be kind of a quintessential Qualtrics, piece of data that others would find hard to replicate?
Well, if you take an airline, for example, an airline experiences, a customer experiences many different stages of a journey with an airline. Your entire travel journey, the booking the flight, maybe calling the call center if something hasn't gone well, interacting with the app. And along that entire continuum, you learn about people's preferences. You learn about their interests. You learn about what drives friction, what drives disappointment. What are the things that perhaps are showing up as inconvenient that might actually sway someone away from the brand, and maybe within a click they're interacting with another brand as a result of that the next time they're doing the travel journey.
You glean sentiment from behavior.
So we glean sentiment from behavior. We understand how people's behaviors actually reflect emotion, how it reflects on what their intentions might be in the future. We can predict future behaviors because we can connect the dots between certain moments that take place in someone's journey with a brand and the likelihood that they might come back to that brand or not as well. And so this idea of taking this gold mine of information, which is what we call experiential data or X data, and connecting that with what people actually do is really the sweet spot of what we do as a company around experience management. And that's what makes us different from, and frankly, complementary to a CRM system or potentially a marketing analytics system. A lot of these other systems, what they do is they'll track what's happening. What we do is we'll tell you why it's happening as a result of that. And so the combination of our type of data, our type of system, connecting with these operational platforms makes all the difference in the world for how a brand gets closer to their customer.
I do want to quickly touch on the ownerships because, maybe it makes no difference, but you were part of SAP. Now you're private. What difference does it make to your own joy and happiness? Let's start with that.
First off, for me, I'm a product person and I spend a lot of time working with customers and working with our software engineers, our scientists, and our product people on enabling the vision and doing things that really matter for people. And as you mentioned, we were part of SAP. In fact, we were about to go public a few years ago, and SAP came in and said, let us help you grow this company, take it international, and go public by becoming a part of SAP. And so we did that. And then later, we filed to go public a few years later, and we had a great public offering. And then most recently, we've taken the next step, and we're now a private company.
Nobody wants to go public these days.
It's hard to be a public company. Yeah. It's especially in these markets. It's hard to be focused on the long run, especially with things that you want to be able to advance, to the benefit of customers. We take a long run view around everything that we build in our platform, and so we make 5-year bets. That doesn't mean that there aren't benefits also to being public. But at this particular stage, we were acquired by Silver Lake as well as CPPIB and
Canada Pension Plan Investment Board.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then Excel Partners also came back. Excel Capital came back in, which was one of the venture capital firms that was part of our story prior to being acquired by SAP. The largest investment in 40 years history, a $500 million investment in the company. And, look, we're shifting into a mode where we see exponential growth and opportunity to be able to supercharge
because of
what we're doing with the company. Partly because of the AI, partly because of what we're seeing in trends across industries and how people are looking at the Qualtrics experience management system to be one of the top 3 or 4 SaaS systems you have to have running inside your company. In order to be able to understand and get closer to your customers, in order to be able to attract and retain employees, to be able to make a difference for you inside of your company. And so how companies are running their businesses is highly dependent on those types of factors. And our platform is becoming an essential piece of that equation.
So I think one of the best ways to sort of close the loop for me is the value of the aggregate data you have. Can you give me some sense of the trends you're seeing in the aggregate that might be useful for business leaders? I know we're talking very much about your direct relationships with your customers, but you have this huge database. Mm-hmm. Give us some sense of what are you seeing that's on your radar you'd put on ours?
Well, the value, if you look at the data sets that our customers have on their customers, we help companies to create a profile and a memory bank of call it the ground truth of what they need to know about their customers. And the value that's coming from that is knowing how to take all of the sum of the parts of how they've interacted with their customers across different channels. So from your digital channel to your in-store experience or your call center environment, and get an aggregate view all the way down to the customer of one, and then be able to automate and move at a faster speed as a company.
But take that one and then to the many. Like, we've been through a pandemic, we're in a tough economy right now. We're a very polarized society. Are you seeing that in the data? Are you seeing anything that you would, I know maybe it's like, if you want to find out, buy my product, but just in general, at the 30,000 foot view, I'm curious, with all of this rich data you have, what are you seeing that maybe might make us more insightful about just the zeitgeist of how consumers are behaving?
Well, what we're seeing is people want a much more personal relationship. They want faster speed of convenience. They expect most organizations to be digitally connected to them. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. In fact, one of the greatest observations that I have of watching businesses in different industries is how one industry leader does not want to pay attention to what's going on with their industry. They're paying attention to what's going on in other industries to know how consumer behavior is going to show up in their own industry. I'll take, for example, in healthcare. Some of the world's greatest leaders in healthcare who are our customers today are paying attention to what's happening with consumer products. The digital experience that shows up, in our everyday life, for example, sending a message or buying something, translates to the types of convenience that people expect in healthcare, as an example, right? And so this idea of how you personalize, how you remember the last time that you interacted with someone, regardless of the channel or the medium that was used, how you pick up where you left off, how you assist the employee to do the right thing, and to do that at scale with speed, can make all the difference in the world for how a brand succeeds and actually expands and within their marketplace. And also, we're in a interesting time at this stage where any company within an industry can change the way that their industry is defined. Like if you look at healthcare, for example, we're finding that there are retailers that are coming into the healthcare space. And you say, why is that the case? Well, people are reimagining the art of the possible and say, okay, if I need to get access to an urgent care clinic, why can't it be as close as to the neighborhood that I'm living in, right? And be able to have access to the types of services that I would expect. And of course, along with that, what's the digital experience that comes with that? And how do you look at the entire, the whole of the care experience for someone in healthcare, for instance, right? And so, those are principles that are translating from other industries. And you're seeing an increased pace at which people are transferring the knowledge of what takes place in one industry as applying it to another. And that's because you and I as consumers, we live across a combination of industries every single day, right?
Yeah.
We might be buying something from one company and then interacting with another, a service provider within a week, and we set expectations, and the pace in which that is changing is faster than ever. So then how do you get ahead of that as a leader? You have to get closer to your customers. You have to understand what they're thinking, how they're feeling. And then you have to be able to apply the insights from that into action. So how do you automate the behavior of your company? How do you actually suggest things that your employees can do more effectively? How do you do it more consistently? And this is where AI comes in, because you can build models that allow you to be able to get things right more often and become more human as an organization as a result.
Let me end by asking advice for different stakeholders. My first stakeholder is government, because there's some fear factors. I think Italy even tried to ban generative AI for a couple of weeks and dropped that. What advice do you have to regulators who are just getting their arms around AI? Because just the term, sometimes induces fear for you and seems to evoke opportunity.
Yeah, number one, I think it's important to be curious and understand what the art of the possible becomes. And I think that if we look at the world 10 years from now, we will see major step functional improvements in the things that might feel more rudimentary today, and how human beings spend their time, will be different. And frankly, we will, as a society, I think, evolve, and things will become more improved no matter where
you
people
have
are in their
government
life.
customers, right? Isn't that one of your target
Even
markets?
and government customers. If you think if a government, there are many governments that are our customers. But what's also interesting, governments are paying attention to what's also happening in other industries as well. So the citizens of a government are residents, right? And they have expectations of the elected officials that ultimately, are going to work for them. They want their budgets managed effectively and put to use in places that actually are going to deploy resources in the right way for the communities. So how do you do that well? You have to tune in. You have to understand what people want, what they feel, what they're thinking, what they would prefer. If you give them 2 or 3 options, you have to pay attention to things in a statistically relevant way. And so we've had many examples of governments that are doing this quite well at the state and local government levels, at the federal government levels, advancing the way that resources are made available on the website, being able to make it easier to access certain services. But at the same time, helping provide knowledge to elected officials around well, how do you prioritize one thing over the other in the way that you spend your money?
People are angry, sir. Qualtrics is. I want to skip past the final stakeholder is the consumer and how we interact with our own information. We know that our own data is valuable. How do you as a consumer, are you somebody who tends to accept, the cookies and such? Or tell me about your own experience first, because I think that you know better than most how your data is being used.
Yeah, I tend to pay attention a lot to the organization that I work with. In fact, I any brand that I end up interacting with, I tend to try to turn the table. I say, what do they know about my own behaviors up to this point, and how are they collecting the data that's there? And does it benefit me? And if they learned from my last interaction with them, and in most cases, you see people who are on a journey to try to get better, but they've got a long ways to go in many respects. So, I think both of us can probably think of examples where.
So you share your data generally, or do you tend to keep it close to your chest?
I tend to share it, and it's with the expectation and the idea that data will be used to be able to improve a subsequent experience.
So if they don't use your data well, don't give it to them, I guess, or whatever.
Or change the brand within a click, and that's the reality of these days, right?
Anything else? Help us see around the corners to what's next for you. If we're sitting here a year from now, what do you hope we're talking about?
I hope we're talking about some great success stories of, continuing to build on the type of work that we've been doing today. We get to work with great brands like American Express, Delta Airlines, United Parcel Service, and each in their own rights they're using our system to redefine the art of the possible with the experiences for their customers. Mm-hmm. The use of AI and how we're innovating will create some new breakthroughs in the speed at which people are more conveniently interacting with their favorite brands. Mm-hmm. And so, if we're sitting together a year from now, I hope we get to talk about great stories of success like that for our customers and how we're partnering and what that means in the world of experience management being applied towards making business more personal, making it more human.
Good. Thanks for joining us, Zig.
Likewise. Thank you, Diane.